Hey, Stepsters. I'm Lasya.
And I'm Kritika, and we're your trainers from Future Steps.
Today we'll be learning about the DNA, which is the blueprint of life. We all have DNA in our cells. This is also known as deoxyribonucleic acid, hence the short form, which is DNA. And these are codes that build every living thing.
Yep. So now let's get into what a DNA is. So, a DNA is the instruction manual for life. Interesting, right? It's almost, you could think of it like the instruction manuals you get for your washing machine, for example. And then, like last year said, it's found in nearly every cell. And if our DNA is stretched out, it will be 2 meters per cell. Can you believe that? 2 whole meters? That is enough DNA to probably cover the distance of the Earth. Or maybe I'm exaggerating.
Okay, DNA has its own structure, which is known as the double helix. So this is a twisted ladder structure. It is discovered by Watson and Crick. So like you saw in the picture before, they are twisted like that. And that's why they called the double helix. And they're two long strands that coiled together. So that like the picture we saw before, remember they were like that and they had some lines in between them. That's how they're coiled together. And rungs are the small chemical basis pairs that connect to each other. So like I talked before in the picture before, we had like two strands going on and we have like small empty like things in the middle, right? Those are rungs. Those are basically the chemical base pairs of the DNA that connect to each other. And we'll later talk more detail about them. And this shape allows the DNA to store information. So in this shape, the DNA can store many information and help our body go through many processes that we need to go through every single day of our lives. And Kritika has drawn like the shape of the DNA there. As you can see, the lines there, the squiggly lines are the twisted ladder or the two long strands, while the middle lines are those rungs, which are the chemical base pairs.
Yep, that is interesting, isn't it? Okay, so let me just clear this so we can move on to more fun things. Okay, the building blocks of DNA. So we talked about those rungs, right? Those were base pairs. Now, what do you mean by base pairs? Obviously, base pairs, you wouldn't know about them until you get to know about the bases. So we have four bases here. We have adenine or adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine. These four, these are the four main bases, and they pair with each other to make those line thingies we saw in the DNA. I would draw it again, but I think you guys can go back in the video and look at it again. So every pair, a pair has two things. So in this case, it has two bases, and there are two types of pairs. Actually, there are four, but let's make it simpler. So the four is going to be A and T is one pair, T and A is another pair. And you're like, aren't they the same thing? Well, not really, but this explanation you are probably going to get when you go into more of a in-depth biology later on. But for now, just remember there are four pairs. One is A and T, the other is T and A, there's G and C, and then there's C and G. And you can see how it says adenine paired with thymine, and then thymine pairs with adenine, and you see A and T, T and A, and then G and C, C and G. You could also think of this as, oh, G and C look pretty similar, so they go together, and then you know that the other two are A and T, so obviously they have to go together. So
And there's
Uh,
also another saying called apples and trees. You know how apple trees make up? So apples and trees, so adenine and thymine, and guacamole and chips, so guanine and cytosine. That's another way you can remember the pairs.
yeah, that's a much better way. You should probably do that. So I hope this thing. So you're gonna need to remember these pairs for later in the future. So I would say you can practice with it or just like label a DNA structure and just have fun drawing something.
Next, we have the genes and chromosomes. So genes are the DNA segments that code for proteins. These are really important because they make us up, right? And they code for proteins that are really important for our body. Then we have chromosomes, and these are like 46 in humans. So there are 46 of these present in humans, packed with thousands of genes. And then we have traits. So the eye color, or your hair color, your height, or any other features, they come from genes. So I think we talked about this in our channel before in reproduction where the genes of like a mother and a father they combine to make who you are right now. And there are many different ways or many different like personalities you could have had, but you're one of a kind in those. So in many different possibilities of the combination of your traits your mother and your father have, you have some of those traits and you have some of like your mother's and father's traits that make you. And how does this happen? It's because of the chromosomes. And if you want to know more about this, you need to go to our channel and check out our video about reproduction and heredity. In that way, you can know more about this and how you actually have the traits you have right now.
Yep. And I'm telling you, it's a pretty cool video. Okay, so now let's talk about DNA in action. So, making proteins. Our DNA stores genetic information, like we talked about earlier. And then our RNA, you're probably like, what is an RNA? Or, well, we're not going to go too much in depth about an RNA, but just know that it copies and carries those instructions. And then we have our protein, which we all know about, is what it's it's what does all the work in your body. And there are a different there are a lot of things that contain protein in our DNA. So protein is really, really important. Okay, and yeah, DNA in action making proteins, as in DNA makes proteins. And that process we're also gonna learn later on when we move into higher levels of biology.
Now, let's talk about the DNA replication and how it actually copies the blueprint. So you all know that you have a lot of DNA because you have many cells and each cell has DNA, right? So how does our body make these many like, identical DNA that makes us up, right? This is how. So DNA first it unzips. You know that DNA has two strands, right? In the first step, the strands separate like opening a zipper. So they make themselves into one strand. So these are like two strands, right? Here in the picture. Now it's going to be cut up and it's going to be one strand. And then you have the new bases attaching themselves. So A pairs with T or T pairs with A and C pairs with G or G pairs with C. And they follow the base pairing rules to be able to pair with themselves. So they're new bases that are like produced in our body, and they are attached to the opposite, like the base pairing rules basically AT or TA, CG or CGC. These are the base pairing rules, and that's how our DNA, the chemical bases attach themselves to one another, and that's how it makes a whole two-stranded DNA. And then you have two identical DNA molecules forming. each with one old strand and one new strand. So the one old strand is from the DNA unzipping. That's the one strand, one whole strand, when the two strands are cut into um two separate ones, and the new bases attaching to them makes it a whole like DNA on its own. So you get two different DNA strands from one DNA strand. If I think I hope you're understanding what I'm saying here. So basically, if you see in the photo, we have one DNA strand, right? One whole DNA strand with two strands in it. Now, when we undergo the DNA replication process, it's gonna be converted into two DNA strands. So that means you're gonna always have the double of what you already have in the DNA. And that's how you get exactly the same DNA for all the different cells in your body. And that's how you make your own DNA and you have your own body with your own traits.
Yep, and just in case you guys didn't understand part of that, what she means is, you know how there's the DNA that looks somewhat like this? That is one strand, right? That's one DNA. So let's say this is strand 1 and that is strand 2. If you think about it that way, then when she says unzips, she means, you know how there are all those line things? What she means by unzips is that these things open from the middle, okay? And when that happens, then the DNA is basically into two strands because they've opened now, right? One is your old, which I cannot write. One is your old strand, and the other is the new one. And then using these base rules, there is also these things. Let me, okay. So because of those new rules, you know how there were these rungs? They still exist. They're still there. Okay. And the reason why I made it this way because I wanted to kind of just draw it on this side so you could see it better. And then let's say this part is A, right? Then when when they are making a new a new DNA, there's gonna be the base pair of AT here. And then by the rules it's gonna keep building and keep going to make an actual DNA. So that's just a visual way of taking it, but um the way she explained it is pretty good, and just remember it unzips and then something else zips back to one side kind of thing. Okay, moving on. Simple DNA extraction experiment. To people who have already watched our previous videos, you don't have to redo this, but we're just giving this experiment again because I really like this experiment and it's a really good experiment. So what you're going to need are strawberries, dish soap, salt, and water, as in a mixture. So this we're gonna call this our soap mixture, and then rubbing alcohol. It says cold, but it doesn't have to be cold. Just make sure it isn't really hot, which would be kind of weird because it's rubbing alcohol. And then also have a zipper bag or a plastic bag and a filter. This thing says coffee filter. You could have any filter as long as it could take solids off the liquid. And then now we're going to talk about the steps. So take your strawberries, put them in the zipper bag or the plastic bag, and then mash them so that it's it doesn't look like strawberries anymore. And then add your soap mixture and then filter out all of the liquid from the mashed strawberries, and then add that to the soap mixture, and then pour a little bit of cold alcohol, but very slowly. So don't just pour like a whole bunch all together. Just slowly keep adding a little bit of alcohol, and then just wait for a few minutes. You're gonna see like a white fuzzy layer on top. That is the DNA of those strawberries. And we call this experiment the strawberry DNA extraction, but and it's a really good experiment. You should definitely try this. So do have some fun with this.
Now let's look at fun facts and surprising connections. So 99.9% same. So this means humans share almost identical DNA. And all life, like plants, animals, and bacteria, all use DNA. So we all have DNA. Gene switching is environment can turn genes on and off. Isn't that really cool?
Interesting. It's almost like, you go in the sun and you start tanning kind of thing sometimes, but that probably isn't the best example. And let's see. Okay, this is my favorite part. Why does DNA matter? You're probably like, oh, we learned so much about DNA, but why do we need it again? So, DNA can help us solve crimes, cure diseases, and improve improve food. And you're probably wondering how can it do all of that? It's only DNA. So, our DNA is in our cells, it's in our blood, it's in everything of us basically. And how can it help solving crime scenes? Is because if you leave fingerprints, if you leave a piece of your hair or a part of your nail or something, then scientists can find your DNA in any any of the things you left behind, and they can figure out that you were the criminal. I'm not saying you're the criminal, but that's just the setting for now. And then it can help us cure diseases because people with because you could take off a little bit of DNA and then you could experiment with it, and that's how scientists can come up with cures and vaccines. And then for improving food, you can combine two different DNAs. Can you believe that? That is crazy, isn't it? You can combine two DNAs and make a mixed product. And it's not simple though. So it's probably not something you can try at home. But it is really cool. And that is all we have for you today. We learned about a lot of things today. We learned about what the DNA looks like, what are the bases, what are the parts of the DNA. We saw what DNA does, what is the use of having a DNA, and how many cool things come with our DNA, right? So that's all we have for you today. And I know you probably thought that the solving crimes thing is really cool. At least I think it's really cool. So you can definitely watch some more videos on this, and you can also comment down any questions, any concerns, or just any comments you would like. We do see our comments, so you could ask us for video suggestions or video requests. For example, if you want us to record a video on um some math subject, you could just comment down on one of our videos. We do look at all of our comments. So feel free to comment down anything you'd like. That is all we have for you today. We'll see you in our next video then. Goodbye.
Bye, stepsters.